Hello everyone. Thank you very much for coming to the talk. This is sadly one of the last events of the South Cowal Community Festival. We've had lots of good history talks and craft kits, poetry workshop, music night, but tonight we are very excited to bring you a talk from one of the best foraging teachers out there, Mark Williams from Galloway Wild Foods. In case anyone doesn't already, it is well worth following him on Facebook or Instagram, and I definitely recommend doing one of the foraging walks if you ever get a chance. Before I pass you over to Mark, a few housekeeping points. The talk's being recorded. If you don't want to be on camera, then you can turn off your video. Everyone's muted, and there'll be a time at the end for questions. If you want to write a question in the chat box, then I can read it out for you. Other than that, I hope everyone enjoys the talk, and I will pass you over to Mark.
Am I on now?
You should be, yep, there we go.
Excellent. I hope you can all see me. Give a little wave if you can, yeah, just for my confidence, you know. Yeah, okay, excellent. Yeah, hi everyone. So yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, Emily got in touch quite a while ago during lockdown. It sounds like you're doing loads of great things over in Cowal, and yeah, keeping going. And I promised, I said I would do this talk, and then everything went very crazy quite recently with COVID-19 and all my usual walks and things like that. But I'm very happy to be here and to yeah, have a little chat about wild booze and what we can do, or the drunken botany of everyday plants is how I refer to it. It's where the two great passions of my life connect, and those passions are foraging and drinking, alcohol, but not always. And I'm very fortunate in that my work as a full-time foraging teacher has connected me with a lot of amazing chefs and in particular bartenders. You're probably aware that for a short while everybody was making gin. I don't know if you have a South Cowal gin or not, but yeah, everybody was making gin for a little while, and so I've consulted. I got the nice job of going around a lot of distilleries for a few years there and consulting on their botanicals and helping them to concoct it. And in so doing, I met lots of great bartenders who would and great drinks makers who gave me lots of tips. So I'm kind of just expanding on that and feeding back. And we find that great synergy when you work with a good chef or a bartender, and you bring them the plant knowledge of the raw ingredients out in the wild. They can do amazing things because they've got all the techniques. So I've kind of given them a little bit of that and borrowed a little bit myself from them. So yeah, we'll share some of that today, and I'm hoping to make a couple of my drinks at the end. It always seems a bit sad to make a drink and not be able to share it with you all, which is what I normally do on my guided walks and when people book me for private events and things like that. But yeah, it's nice to it'd be nice to kind of try and put a drink or two together. You'll probably see from behind me here, I'm in my drinks lab. This is, I said it was a bit of a passion rather than a job, so this is kind of where I concoct, and there are bottles up there that are probably barely legal, and some of the things I've kind of forgotten what's in them, but every couple of years they come to the back to the front of the shelves, and I kind of dig in and sort of have a little taste and try and work out what they were and see if we can make something tasty. And what I've discovered is, if something doesn't taste very nice, put it to the back of the shelf, come back in a year, and it almost always gets a little bit better. So that's my theory on that. So the way I'm going to run it today is more of a sort of slide presentation, I suppose. I've got some pictures because I found holding up plants to the screen doesn't work very well on these things. You can't see much detail, but I might flick in and out and spread it out a little bit. And do please type questions as we go. And Emily may be able to read them out as we go if they're relevant to something I've been talking about, or we can try and save them up to the end. So we're aiming for about an hour. So, right, I'm going to try and share my screen now. Bear with me if anything goes strange. I think you might maybe still have me in a little box in the corner. Host has disabled screen sharing. Emily?
Bear with me.
I think, yeah, you probably disabled everybody else's, including mine, yeah.
If you try again now, that should be
okay.
it.
Okay, great.
The wonders of technology.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, I think hopefully everybody can see this, and I think if we can enlarge it, yeah, you get a bigger screen as well. Yeah, okay, so that's me, Galloway Wild Foods. I have been teaching about wild food and foraging for about 30 years. I was terrified to discover quite recently when somebody showed me a photo, and that was over on Arran where I grew up, so just across from Cowell. Yeah, I know the kind of flora and fauna of the area quite well around the Clyde and Argyll. Yeah, and then I share my kind of interest and passion through Galloway Wild Foods. So a lot of the stuff I talk about today, you might be able to read further on my website if you just pop over there. And I'm constantly sharing tips and things like the stuff we're going to be talking about here today on my social media feeds as well. So there's lots of follow-up information there if you need it. I've called this talk Drunken Botany, or how to make tasty cocktails from weeds. Also mushrooms and seaweed I've used as well sometimes. It sounds a bit weird and wonderful, but yeah, you can certainly use anything with an interesting flavour is good. I love the term drunken botany. I have to confess I stole that phrase from a great book called The Drunken Botanist by a woman called Amy Stewart. And those of you who are interested in making nice drinks at home and cocktails and things like that, I can highly recommend that book. It's not really about the foraging side of things, but lots of great tips on just general plants and the history. And when you break it down, everything we drink, everything we eat just starts with a plant or possibly a mushroom. So yeah, we're just going to taking that to more new extremes with this, I suppose. It's quite fashionable now, and there's all manner of different things we can use, but it's not new. This is a book from something like 1876 called The Bon Vivant's Companion by a guy called Jerry Thomas. Now, any bartenders who have tuned in will know that he's an absolute legend he's the man who basically coined the phrase cocktail. He's the first guy to write a cocktail book and start talking about mixing drinks together to make even nicer drinks. In his book there, he uses all sorts of plants that now seem either old-fashioned or really new-fashioned, if you think about the kind of the hipster world or foraging scene that as it is at the moment. But I could highly recommend that book as a great source of inspiration, The Bon Vivant's Companion. Don't try and buy an original. When I was finding that picture, I noticed that it's the original copies sell for about £500 quite often, but it's actually worth looking out. There's some reprints of it you can get for a few quid. So yeah, The Bon Vivant's Companion, great name as well. In talking about this, I wanted to think about what makes a good drink. I'm talking about, I will break this down into making some kind of infused gins and syrups and things to make with it. But, what are the components of a delicious drink? Well, it's quite straightforward. It's like a balancing act between things like sweet, sour, booziness, how strong you like it, mouthfeel or the texture. Now you're all appearing in a little line next to the other side of my presentation. I'm not sure if I can move you or not, but from the top of my head, the other things would be aromatics and umami, and one other thing that will be on my list, and we'll come to it as we go down it, and also presentation, making it look nice. So I'm going to kind of go through these things. This is a lot to cover in an hour or less than an hour now, and try and demonstrate a drink or two as well. But it's actually, if you think about balancing those things in any drink, and most of the delicious drinks that people really go back to time and time again combine all of those things. Oh yes, of course, bitter is the other thing, possibly the most important thing of all. So we're gonna kind of do a little whistle-stop tour of them and just look about how we can pull in those flavors and those mouthfeels and things from wild plants, especially those that you'll find around Cowell. We're talking about weeds here. It's a friend of mine from Galloway, where I live, who was cursing his garden because it became a weed bed. But actually, when we picked through it a little bit, we found all sorts of delights. So we're talking about stuff that you should be able to encounter on fairly everyday basis. Foraging is not really about seeking out the weird and the wonderful. For me, foraging is very much about connecting with what's there. The drinks I'm going to make today, one of them in particular is made with everything within 20 meters of my house, 50 meters maybe. The other one maybe has come a little bit further afield, but it's about just recognizing what's there and puzzling out how you can use them. And it's a lot of fun. It's like a little problem solving exercise where you get a drink at the end of it. What's not to love? So I'm going to start off with these kind of components of a drink and start off with sour. I'm guessing around Cowell, I know the sea lochs of Argyll and the Clyde estuary have a lot of this fairly notorious plant. And I'm guessing a few of you might recognize it too well. So if you have it in your garden, you're probably rolling your eyes. But of course, this is Japanese knotweed. Little shoots of it we're seeing here. And it actually, it's one of our non-native invasive plants, so it's considered quite problematic. And especially the sea lochs, I do a lot of work around Loch Fyne, and Loch Fyne's absolutely full of it. So that side of, and then the other, I'm sure I've seen it around when I've been on the Cowell Peninsula as well. So it kind of takes over and it spreads along the seashore and down river systems and so on. But it's actually got a great sour flavor. It's a member of the dock family, so it's related to sorrel, which we'll talk about later, and all sorts of things like spinach. And it has a sour flavor. It contains a compound called oxalic acid, which is the same flavor as we find in rhubarb. The same acid as we find in rhubarb. So this is a great sour component for drinks. This is what happens if you take young Japanese knotweed shoots. Now, before I go any further, I should just point out that if you are picking Japanese knotweed, there are a few hoops to jump through. You absolutely must not spread it anywhere else. If you cause it to be somewhere else, then you've committed a civil offence, as I understand it. So, you know, and it can reproduce from small pieces. So you need to do this really responsibly and thoughtfully. But if you go along in April, little shoots like these purple ones, when they're coming up to about 2 feet tall, these are lovely, very small ones, but up to about 2 feet tall. And if you can snap them and the little bit of moisture comes out, they're great. Take them, and everything you take away from where you find it, you must either cook or eat or maybe burn. Okay, so but yeah, they can reproduce mostly from the root nodes, but also from leaf nodes as well. So this is something to be careful with. But if we've got a problem, then perhaps we can tackle it by eating it. And I've actually worked with a couple of gin houses who are talking about making a Triffid gin. Well, that's the name I've given to it. Can we make a benefit out of a problem and actually use this amazing vegetable that's really versatile and useful? And that's actually now been used in the herbal remedies for Lyme's disease as well, the roots of Japanese knotweed. I'm getting off piste here a little bit here, so we're going to stay focused on the drinks uses of it, but do some reading up, maybe on my website if you're not familiar with it. You want to be sure it hasn't been sprayed either as well, because people are trying to control it. But yeah, if you can access it and it's in good condition and you're doing it responsibly, then you can juice this down. And this is what happens when you put it through a juicer. I use a rotary juicer, but you could use a wheatgrass juicer with a turning handle. I used an electric rotary juicer, or any kind of masticating juicer would do as well. And you just put those shoots through it, and it pulps them up, and out comes this amazing juice. It comes out this color that settles out to a kind of green. And if you filter that really carefully through like a really fine, clean J-cloth or something like that, or a very fine bit of muslin, you end up with this beautiful, clear, clarified pink liquid. And this is absolutely delicious. I think rhubarb, I mean, it's very closely related to rhubarb. So it's like rhubarb juice, but it has flavors like gooseberry as well. And it's a great acidifier for your drinks. Also, you can simply chop up Japanese knotweed and pop it in. And I think somewhere right in the back of my shelf, this is why I put this in here, because I knew I wouldn't do it very well. Oh yeah, there we go. There's a bottle of botanist from my friends over on Isla, and it says on it, "Nothing's quite what it seems in my pantry, or my drinks cabinet." And this is JK vodka straight. So all I've done is taken some Japanese knotweed and just infused it straight into some vodka there. But that's a simple way to extract flavour. It's all about capturing flavour. But I would actually recommend juicing it like this. It keeps really well in the fridge, and you can freeze it as well. And it's a really great acidifier. Use it instead of lemon juice and things like that in cocktails to add that sour element to drinks. Yeah, and I just wonder about, could we market it as a not so innocent smoothies, guilty smoothies? That was my little marketing idea. I keep having marketing ideas for wild foods. I never follow through on them, but I like to share them out there. So. And this is a drink that I made with Japanese knotweed. It's made with Japanese knotweed infused vodka, a little bit of sour element. I used the clarified Japanese knotweed juice. I used a little bit of syrup made with a plant called sweet cicely, which has a sweetness, a natural sweetness of its own, and pairs very well with Japanese knotweed, and quite common around the west coast of Scotland as well. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And yeah, and a little bit of bitters as well. We'll talk about the importance of bitters in drinks a little bit further on in the presentation. So I call this the Triffid Sour. And the lovely thing as well is the Japanese knotweed stems are basically hollow. So you can actually, they have segments in them, but if you put a skewer down the middle of them and cut them, you can actually make them into a straw. And this is a photo where I actually worked that one out because I was already using a straw. And I realized that, well, why use a straw that you brought in when you've got lovely hollow stems that actually add to the flavor of the drink as you drink it. So we can do that with other plants as well that have hollow stems. And I love that concept of actually flavoring the drink through the medium that you're drinking it. So sucking things through an Angelica straw or a Japanese knotweed straw is quite nice. So yeah, that's the Triffid Sour, using Japanese knotweed in all sorts of sour. One of the phrases I use a lot when I'm working with bartenders, especially in the UK, is to get over the citrus addiction. You know, we have become addicted to the flavors of other places, and one of those key ones, it happens with spices a lot, but one of the key ones that we're really addicted to is lemons and oranges and citrus fruit in general. Now, I'm not surprised because they are delicious and I've got absolutely nothing against the lemon, but you know, we have our own native acidifiers that are absolutely delicious and can add really good sour elements to drinks, so we can get over our addiction. And it might not be exactly the same as using some lemon juice, but what it is that it's our sour thing. We can actually recalibrate our taste buds to our own flavors that we have around us, save a few food miles as well. So yeah, here's another great acidifier, sorrel. I'm sure lots of you will be fairly familiar with sorrel, and yeah, they're quite a common little plant of grassland. I've actually got some here. I'm not sure how big I'm showing on your screens, but as I mentioned earlier on, it doesn't work very well holding things up. You can probably see why here. But yeah, this is a common sorrel leaf. Also related to the Japanese knotweed, and the acidic ingredient in this is oxalic acid. And oxalic acid is also present in things like in rhubarb, and if you suffer from kidney stones or something, you might be told to go easy on rhubarb, and in which case you would go easy on sorrel as well. You have to eat an awful lot of sorrel or drink an awful lot of sorrel to actually have any problems from oxalic acid, but it can displace calcium from the blood, so just go easy. But just a really nice simple thing to liven up your gin and tonic is just get a handful of sorrel leaves, smash them, muddle them into a glass, and then pour over your gin. Bit of tonic if you like that sort of thing, or whatever kind of mixer you like on your gin, and it just adds that acidity, and you're kind of using that instead of lemon juice. So and you're also using it in sort of in the way you would use mint in a mojito, you know, so smashing it in the glass with the back of a spoon, or if you've got a pestle or something like that, then that's a really nice way just to lighten it up and add that kind of extra acidic note to your drink. Yeah, just a little few notes there from one of the guided walks I do is on identifying sorrel leaves. So they always have a little V shape where the stem meets the leaf, and yeah, they're fairly straightforward to identify. But you do have to look out for another plant called Lords and Ladies, which has generally much bigger, glossier leaves, and it has ridging around the edges. That would burn your mouth, so go carefully. It's always an extra hazard with foraging, so keeps us on our toes. What other acidifiers could we use that are around us all the time? And well, this is very of the moment now because we're well into autumn now, and crab apples are pretty abundant in a lot of places. Don't worry if your crab apples look scabby or skanky like these guys do. That's just normal for crab apples. They've just got character and personality, but they're really great, and they have super acidity. There's a slightly different acid that makes them sour. This is the kind of acid that you can kind of feel on your teeth sometimes. You have a really sour sweet or something like that, or if you bite into a very sour apple, you get that funny kind of thing of happening on your teeth. But yeah, the acidity of crab apples means that actually you don't have to rush around harvesting them all in the autumn. It's nice to pick them off the tree, but I actually pick a lot of mine in December, January, even February, but they've fallen off the tree, and they're so acidic that they just lie on the ground for months afterwards. So you can harvest bucket loads of crab apples up from underneath crab apple trees well into the winter. And what to do with them? Well, actually, you can juice them. Again, you're going to need to have a rotary juicer probably for this, or something like that, or an apple press. That's a nice way to do it. So, you know, possibly a little bit of equipment, but what it can give you is lots of different flavors. So crab apples are quite often ornamental, and we have lots of different varieties. So no two crab apple trees taste quite the same, and you can actually see here on the right of the photo is a red one, which is an ornamental variety that I pick in a park near me, and the left one is a more sort of traditional crab apple with those kind of green, sometimes a little bit scabby kind of apples. And I don't really know which strain of crab apple these are, but they're pretty straightforward to identify an apple. Cut them in half, look for the pips. That's a nice way to go. But really interesting. So I actually christen the trees that I pick these from. I visit every year now. You always build a relationship with plants, especially plants and trees or fungal mycelia that you visit year on year on year. And I actually developed names. So the tree on the right that gives me these red ones I call Rosy Pucker, because that's got a lovely kind of warming, still acidic, but quite a warming, kind of rosy kind of glow. And the green ones are very, very sharp, very, very tart, and really do take the enamel off your teeth. I call them Old Malik, that tree, Old Malik. So they're, yeah, I'm a bit sad like that. Old friends, these trees. Yeah, just to say, so when you've made your crab apple juice, you're just using that almost interchangeably with lemon juice. You might want to clarify it a little bit by letting the sediments settle out in these, or passing it through a finer sieve. But yeah, really nice. And you can use these a lot like lemon juice, doing things like in food as well, like carpaccio, ceviche, that kind of thing, just to add that acidic notes. And it's just reconnecting with something that is native to us as well. So yeah, crab apples, really lovely. You can get, in terms of presentation, you can get very lovely garnishes as well with sour flavor as well. This is berberis blossom, which is about in the spring. One of the first things to start to flower in the spring. So you're going to see these beautiful orange blossoms, and if you taste them, they've got a lovely acidic kind of flavor. And that was really good as a garnish, so that you're actually embellishing that acidic component as you're eating it. Really lovely little guys, these. I think, yeah, it's autumn now, and the first sloes are starting to ripen around Galloway. I'm sure they are around Cowell, and sloes are very much one of those fruits that is kind of never gone out of fashion in terms of foraging. I think there's been many years, you know, everybody's got their little secret spots for sloes, and I'm sure lots and lots of you out there who are listening are making sloe gin. If you haven't, and you're not familiar with them, sloes are like little acidic plums. They are in the prunus family, so related to plums, damsons, that kind of world, bulissus, and they're really sharp little marbles of tartness. And it's that very tartness that is a delight, and balancing sour with sweet is the absolute kind of pinnacle of getting really good drinks sometimes. So sloe gin, of course, the traditional use for sloe gin would be to put your sloes into a kilner. I've actually probably got some in here. Oh, there we go. This says damsons actually in this one from 2017, so I'm a bit ahead of the game. And the longer you can leave your fruits soaking, the more of that flavour is they're going to pull out. Now, I make a kind of what I like to think is a kind of nice twist on sloe gin. So traditionally, you would put your sloes and sugar. You might prick your sloes and all sorts of things like that, or put them in the freezer so they burst, with some sugar, with some gin. You could also use vodka, it's not essential, and then leave it to infuse. And if you leave it 3 months, it'll be okay. If you can get a year ahead, then it's going to be amazing by the next year. And if you leave it for 3 years, that's when it starts getting really good. I've never managed one more than 3 years, because you have to make an awful lot not to drink it, because it just gets better. So it's just it's going to disappear. But what I do is actually don't put my sugar in at the start. I wait, and so all I've got in this at the moment, even from 2017, is damsons, and they're just infusing away in the gin. And when I'm ready, I will get some flowers. So the flowers of blackthorn, which is where we get our slowberries from, appear. They're the first flowers to appear in the spring. So if anybody has trouble finding sloes, then the best way to find them is to go out in April, the start of April, and look around all the hedgerows for a big drift of white flowers, and that'll be the sloe blossoms, or perhaps another prunus family, but blackthorn's a really common hedgerow plant. So it's yeah, it's a really good way to spot them, much easier than trying to spot the berries. So we can spot them in the spring. So what I do is then I've got my my sloes in from the winter before, just soaking in gin, and then I'll pick a load of the flowers and I'll infuse those into syrup, and the flowers have this bitter almond flavour. Now I cracked onto this idea when I read some of the old recipes for sloe gin say add some almond essence. When you look into that, almond is, you know, related to the sloes, the prunus family, so you know there's a kind of lineage there, and they share similar compounds. So almond, if you eat these young flowers of blackthorn, they'll have this bitter almond flavour, and really strong almond flavour, but with a bitterness to it as well. And whenever you taste that bitterness, and it spreads right through that bitterness through apple pips, all the Rosaceae family, lots of members of the Rosaceae family, the subfamily, the prunus family. There's stones and pips and seeds of lots of these things, and even quite often foliage has this bitter almond kind of flavour. It's usually bitter as well. Whenever you taste that, this is actually a precursor to cyanide. I'm sure lots of you will know that apple pips contain very small amounts of this precursor to cyanide. And so yeah, if you did eat loads and loads of these flowers, you probably would get a little bit ill. But again, dosage is everything with any kind of plant or food, and just being sensible. There's such a strong flavour that you're not going to come into any harm. So what I was doing, pick a load of those flowers in the spring, make them into a syrup, and then I can use the syrup to sweeten my sloe gin, and then it becomes very sloe gin. So you're actually tasting the full progression of the plant, if you like. And that almond flavour really balances out the back end of the gin. It works really well. So yeah, give that a go. I'd highly recommend it. And if you, the flowers are a little bit fiddly to pick, but there's so much flavour in them, you don't need to pick lots and lots. So we're still on sours. I should have made this a talk just about sour things to use in drinks, but we will get on some of the other things anyway. But they're so interesting, some of these sour things. This is sea buckthorn. So another sort of shrub, about the size of a hawthorn, quite often grows coastally. Now, I'm not sure if there's much of this around Cowell, South Cowell, but it does like it around the coast, so I'm sure you'll have areas of it, or maybe some of you have it in your gardens. But it has these really beautiful bright orange berries that are burst very easily. If you try and pick them when they're really ripe, they're just like little balloons and they pop. And sometimes the best way is just to prune off big twigs of them and then put them in the freezer and pop them off in the freezer. They are very sour, but also lovely, with a really lovely, rich, kind of fruity kind of flavour as well. Although occasionally, about 1 in 10 people, I think, finds they taste a little bit of baby sick. So yeah, maybe you just get unlucky with that sometimes. It does come up quite often when I'm trying it out on people. So yeah, sea buckthorn is amazing and rich, and if you can get it. So yeah, when I give it out my guided walks, we do the sea buckthorn face. So I pass around everyone a tiny shot of straight sea buckthorn juice, and we sit and we have a little look for the sea buckthorn face. So that's somebody, yeah, quite sour. So what we need to do is balance all that sourness. We've got all these lovely kind of sour things going on, but we need to balance it with some sweetness, and that balancing act is the key. So what sweet things can we use from nature? Well, onto sweet things. So this is me harvesting birch sap in the spring. Sweet is quite hard to come by in the wild. I'm not gonna lie. It's we have become, I think, our palates have become so attuned to so much sugar and highly processed sugar that the amount of sugar you find in things in the wild is so minimal that we probably become almost immune to it. You know, so if you gave up sugar for a year, there might be things that you find sweet. And one of the things that does have natural sugar in is birch sap. So here I am this would happen in March kind of time, tapping into birch trees carefully and kind of looking after the tree, making sure the tree's healthy and a good size. And there are less impactful ways than drilling to do this. You can just literally snap a twig and get a small amount. Yeah, if you've got lots of birch trees around you, it's quite easy to do in a pleasant way to the tree. And yeah, birch sap. And so birch sap is about 97 to 98% water, but the other maybe 2% has got all sorts of amazing flavors in it, and some sweetness as well, some natural sugars. So you have to reduce it down from a big kilner, one of those big demijohns that you're seeing there, reduced down, makes about one of these little tiny jars. Okay, so that just shows you. And what I've got in here is this very rich, thick syrup, almost like molasses. And I reduce it right down so it keeps really well because it's got such a high sugar content then. And it almost has this burnt kind of caramel kind of flavor. The worst possible thing you can do when you're reducing down that amount of birch sap is to you turn your back at the last minute and it burns, and it's absolutely terrible. The whole thing is quite energy intensive and quite full on for quite a small return, but it's a lovely thing to do. Maybe, you know, if you've got lots of healthy birch trees around you, and you know, give it a go, or just drink the birch sap and try and taste that natural sweetness from them. There are other things that become sweet. Of course, fruits become sweet. I'm not going to go through all the fruits, but we've got lots of blackberries around at the moment. This is a slightly more unusual one. This is Himalayan honeysuckle, sometimes known as pheasant berry. It's got it in our garden, and yeah, it's really interesting. Grows in these dangling kind of racemes of berries, and they all ripen slightly independently. So you can see on this photo on the left, the ones at the top are looking really dark, and the berries further down are a little bit lighter. And if you taste the light ones, they're really bitter. If you taste the dark ones, and they're really soft when you taste them, like the one on the drink garnish there, they're absolutely delicious, and they're like sweet, syrupy fig. And they add just a hint of bitterness, but have amazing kind of sweetness. But there's a very fine line between the two things. So it's not something anybody's ever going to be selling commercially because they all ripen at a different stage. But if you have some in your garden, try and get one of the really ripe berries, and it's a lovely little kind of sweet nugget of treacle almost. Lovely for garnishing drinks, and sometimes I muddle a few in the bottom of a glass, and goes very nicely with whiskey with that sweet kind of figgy kind of flavour. Some plants have natural sugars in them. So sweet cicely is a hedgerow plant in the carrot family. So you need to invest some time connecting with that family if you're going to use anything from it, because it has a few scary things in it, like that family, like hemlock, for example, and hemlock water dropwort in particular in west of Scotland. So yeah, you want to watch out for other members of this family. But if you find something with carrot-like leaves and these umbels of white nodding flowers and these small kind of 1 to 2 centimeter long thin seed pods, normally about June the seeds would appear. The foliage and the flowers to a lesser degree, and then especially these seed pods, taste of sweet aniseed, and they're absolutely delicious. So you can infuse those into you know, just cheap vodka, and there is some lurking in there, but I'll probably break the shelves if I try and get into it. It's the trouble, I can't really reach the stuff at the back. But yeah, so if you infuse that into vodka, you're kind of halfway to making pastis or any of those nice anise kind of flavored drinks. And the natural sweetness in sweet cicely is mannitol, which is not especially sweet to our tooth for the reasons I've discussed already, but an absolute delight. These are little hedgerow sweeties, really, and really, really lovely. So actually, really realistically, you know, you're probably going to be reaching for some sugar that we've brought in if you really want to balance up your drinks. So, you know, we've got an abundance of sour, and if you really want to balance them out with sweetness, so some syrup making is really nice. Wood avens is a really common plant of most woods. It's invading our garden. It's very welcome, actually. Well, by me. My wife's maybe not so keen. She's the gardener. But yeah, no, it's a really common plant. Little 5-petaled yellow flowers, as you can see in the corner there. And yeah, if you get the roots of this, and you don't need to be too invasive to collect roots of a small plant like this. You can pull a plant up, come up really easily. You can take off 1/4 of the roots, replant it exactly where it was, and it's probably not much different from taking a few of the leaves in the summer. So, you know, if you're feeling worried about that, you know, just you can do it in a really sensitive, thoughtful way. And you can accumulate these little fine leaves, fine roots, I should say, and they have a most delightful flavor of like somewhere between cloves and cinnamon, really earthy kind of woodsy note, and they make an absolutely delicious syrup. Really great for pouring on ice cream, but also really great for adding sweet notes into drinks. So I actually sometimes sweeten my slow gin that I haven't put any sugar in at the start. Instead of, if I can't be bothered picking all the blackthorn blossoms, the slow blossoms in the spring and making a syrup with that, I'll use this Woodhaven syrup. And it's my go-to syrup, yeah. I'm kind of getting down it. I normally make it in winter. Roots, it's good to use roots in, if you're going to pick roots of anything, you want to be picking them probably in winter. And that's when all the energy is sunk back into the roots. If you pick them in the summer or spring, then all the energy is going up into the leaves. So yeah, kind of February is when I normally restock my Woodhaven's root supply. And then big vats of syrup for all sorts of concoctions. So yeah, Geum urbanum, Woodhaven's. Onto some more flavors now, and this is some of my absolute favorites. Spruce in the spring are amazing, really sharp, and they've got a kind of almost citrusy, lemony kind of vibe to them. The reason for this actually is interesting. The whole of the conifer family, all the conifers that we encounter. So we're talking, spruce, larch, fir, pine, all these sorts of trees. They are related because it's another conifer to juniper, and juniper, of course, is what we use to make gin. So all these other kind of conifers marry incredibly well with gin drinks. And these young tips, when they're soft like this, you can actually pick them in the spring, and that's another thing just to muddle into your gin and tonic and add that kind of citrusy kind of note. Really, really, really good. And the compounds in these that are shared with juniper are also in lemons. They're called terpenes, and in particular limonene and pinene. And these compounds are extremely common in citrus fruits as well. So what we find is in some families, especially with fir, my absolute favorite, my absolute go-to conifer, noble fir, Douglas fir, if you rub the needles of these and smell them, or even if you pop these beautiful little blisters that they have on them, squeezing spots on trees, it's a great hobby. They have this most fantastic grapefruit flavor. I would say grapefruit for fir. And any conifer you try, provided it's not a yew tree, will have something on that kind of citrusy, somewhere between lemon and grapefruit, quite often tangerine. All of these flavors start to come out from the conifers. So what can you do with them? You can infuse those into gin to make it more ginny, in fact. Add those sort of citrusy flavors into your gin. And by infuse, I mean just put them in a kilner and then top it up with cheap gin from the supermarket. Really, really nice way to go. Yeah, so that's a nice little cocktail you can make with it, and I'm going to make a version of this before we finish, actually. So yeah, I call this one the Noble. It's gin and a little mixture I make with fir and a few other conifers as well, and some bitters as well. You can actually drink your Christmas tree this way, provided it's not been sprayed with those things that keep the needles attached. Horrible gluey type chemicals, as long as it's a nice good tree. Before it all dries out, inside, take a few clippings, maybe when you're trying to fit it in the house, and you could just infuse them and drink fir infused gin for you on Christmas Day from your tree. It's really nice. And a lot of people say it tastes Christmassy. I actually think it's just really great citrusy sort of flavor. Grapefruit is a thing that shines. With fir, the needles lay on a flat plane on each twig. I've actually got some here, which maybe, I'm not sure if I'm on small, I should be on big screen for you guys, but the needles just lie on a flat plane. So I turn that around, you can see that it's quite flat that way. Okay, so you've got to be really careful if you're picking fir that you don't get yew, because yew is the one conifer that's very common in the UK and is extremely poisonous. So yew has these flattened berries. They're a little bit curly on that, but they can look more like the fir that I've got here. And just be extra careful. So how do you know you haven't got yew? Well, first of all, if it's got these red little berries on, technically they're cones, but we'll call them berries, then that's a good sign. But because they're not there all year round. So flip them over and look on the underside. Now, if I hold this right up to the camera, perhaps you could just see two silver parallel lines on the underside of each leaf. Okay, That's yew does not have that, but fir does. So if I flip back to this picture, the picture on the right there shows the underside of the needles, and you can see these two parallel silver lines. That'll help keep you safe. Also, yew has no particular discernible smell or flavour, whereas if you've got fir, whether it's Douglas fir, noble fir, or even just another conifer that you've mixed up, and it's got that lovely citrusy grapefruit flavour, then you're on safe ground there. So stay safe. Yeah, try to avoid yew. So we're getting on to bitters now, and bitters are really, really important. Humans have more senses for bitters, bitter flavors, than they do for almost any other flavor. You know, we can detect a few types of sugar, perhaps, maybe strong salt, not so strong salt, a few kinds of umami, things like that. But in terms of bitter, the human palate is calibrated to sense it in a very nuanced way. And we have thousands of bitter receptors all the way down our alimentary canal. And it's for this reason that bitter is incredibly important in just adding that edge to a drink. You know, you don't want to make it fully bitter, otherwise you pull a face like this guy in the corner here. This is called a bitter draft. And quite often bitter is just really just too much, you know, so, but a little bit of bitter works. If you think about tea and coffee, most widely drunk drinks in the world, they have that element of bitter, and humans, although we think of bitter like might be a bad thing, a little bit of bitter judiciously used in a drink is a thing, and that's why we have bitters. Actually, right, there's another whole shelf of booze behind the film here. Looking at me right here is some dandelion and burdock bitters made by a lovely guy up in Aberdeen who makes amazing bitters. This is the classic Angostura bitters. So these are all used in the world of cocktails to add just hints of bitterness, and these are the accent on a drink. You know, these are the things that make it shine. These are the things that make you really notice all the other things about it as well. And you know, bitter is really important. Don't underestimate adding a little bit of bitter to your drinks. How can you do that? Well, what you can do is really easily, I mean, common hogweed I've got here. I literally just stick some seeds from common hogweed. Let's have this quite a bitter kind of citrusy type flavor with aromatics as well, and just put that in some vodka. Really, it could be that simple. And then I've just made a little make a little spray like this, and then you can just mist that onto your gin and tonic. I'll have a little bit now, actually. Oh, breath freshener too. So yeah, that's made with common weed. That's one of my favorite spices. You can read all about that on my website. I probably don't have time to go into it now, but common hogweed seeds are amazing spice, and they're all over the hedgerows now. Again, it's a member of the carrot family, so you need to invest some time in identifications to you've got the right thing. The picture that you're looking at right now, next to our guy with drinking his bitter draft, is actually wormwood, which is the absolute acme of bitter. Bitter is, and wormwood or vermouth. Vermouth is a German word for wormwood, and it was originally used to make a bitter kind of elixir to help kind of people's digestion and maybe expel intestinal worms, all sorts of things like that. But it actually caught on, and vermouth has become kind of a classic. I've got some Dolan. You've probably heard of that. That's quite a famous vermouth. And vermouths are used a lot in cocktails just to add those kind of extra bitter aromatic notes and some depth of flavour to what you're drinking. So you always think about bitter. If you want to go into that world, it's a whole other webinar, and maybe I'll do it one time. But this is my website, and I've recently put up a post called "How to Make Vermouth and Amaro with Forage Botanicals," and there is just a big long list of all the things. So that's probably a really good starting place if you're feeling a bit excited about building up your wild cocktail cabinet. Pop over to my website, have a look at that blog, and that just starts to map out some of the plants that kind of quite exciting to work with, especially in the bitter side. And also there's a recipe section as well. You get some cocktail ideas up there as well. Yep, so I'm going to make some drinks now, and then it'd be nice to have some time to answer any questions. Yeah, that's 1:45 now. So yeah, I'm going to quickly make a drink, and just to show you some of those things in action and talk a bit more. But But do go on my website, have a read up. I'm not trying to sell you anything here. There's lots of free information on there that touches, and all I'm kind of doing here is pushing the door open a crack with some of these things. But there's more learning you need to do behind that if you're going to use these things confidently and build up your wild cocktail cabinet and put them together. But yeah, you can come and join me. About every 2 years, I do a drunken botany safari. And I only do it every 2 years because I need a year to recover, because it's quite terrifying. Actually, we make quite a lot of cocktails in the woods, and it's not good on the risk assessment at all. So yeah, I have to have a year to recover, and then I forget just how kind of crazy it all was. No, honestly, it's a lot of fun. So you can join them, and they're a really nice way to sort of hang out with your pals. And you know, yeah, so pop on the website and see what's available there. So that's me there. I'm going to stop screen sharing now and kind of poke this camera down, if I can get this correct. How do I get back? Okay. So if you're all seeing now, I'm going to try and point the camera down now. Do type in any questions if you have any. I'm going to point the camera down over here. Not quite sure how well that's going to work. Emily, is there any way I can see on a big screen? Right, I'm just in a corner here on my screen. Is there any way I can see what everybody else is seeing?
If you change to the top where it says active speaker, you can pin your video. At the top right, there should be a little thing that says speaker view.
Gallery view, enter full screen, mute my audio, pin video?
Yeah, if you pin your little screen.
Yeah. Okay.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay, so I can see what you guys are seeing now. Yeah, this might not work too well, but we'll see. I'll try and just do this. Please do type in any questions if you've got any questions that came up there, or wider things about making cocktails and drinks. And but what I'm going to do while Emily keeps an eye on that, I'm going to make you a sea buckthorn whiskey sour. How does that sound? So I've got the bright orange sea buckthorn juice here. I've got some whiskey, Highland Earl, absolutely terrible whiskey, but I'm not going to be using like not going to be using all this good stuff. No, don't use good stuff in it. You're putting sea buckthorn juice and all sorts of things in it. You know, use standard whiskey for that, unless you've got loads of money to burn, or you're a really sophisticated cocktail maker. So yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to do a double measure of whiskey. I actually once took a bottle of, I think it was White and Mackay, with me to do a cocktail demonstration at a very nice distillery on Isla that I work with quite a lot. And I brought out this bottle of White Mackay, and you should have seen their faces. They were absolutely scandalized. And then they insisted on giving me, to make pretty much, yeah, probably it was this drink I was making, they insisted on giving me a 200-pound bottle of incredibly fancy whiskey. And I was like, oh no, can't I just put that in my bag and make it with the rubbish stuff? Anyway, you know, you're putting very strong sea buckthorn juice in. So 2 parts whiskey. This is a take on a classic cocktail called a whiskey sour. And all we're doing is substituting the ingredients. You know, most great cocktails have been invented, but what we can do is put twists on them and play around with them. So two of whiskey, 1 of the sea buckthorn juice, boom, and then 1 of this clove root syrup. So this is our sweet element that's going to balance out the sourness. Oh, now this does smell like Christmas. Yeah, this is good, this stuff. And that's a strong syrup I've made there. So that's equal parts sugar and water that I've infused with those roots. 1 of those as well. And then we're going to add a little bit of that hogweed bitters that I talked about, made with these seeds. So we just spray that in. A little bit of that. And then the classic whiskey sour is actually made, this is going to sound a bit freaky if you're not into cocktails or if you've never heard of this before, but you actually put an egg white. What happens in a whiskey sour is they can settle out, and adding an egg white adds mellowness and adds the whole thing, makes the whole thing kind of taste quite quite mellow and creamy. I think yeah, that would be the word, nice and creamy. So I'm just going to put an egg white in there too. Ah, oh, a whole egg. Ah, okay. Well, it's fortunate that you don't have to all drink this, because I think I've just put egg yolk in it as well. But we'll just go with it. Maybe I just avoided that. Okay, and what we do, we take the spring out of our hawthorn strainer and just do a dry shake without ice. Put that spring in there and glass on top. It always seems a little bit more fun when you get to shake it. Okay, so what that's doing is mixing that all up, making it all creamy, and then we add in some ice. Fortunately, my freezer's in here as well. Let's have a little rummage in here. Yep. And then we shake it again. So it's called a dry shake, and then after that we do a wet shake with the ice. It's a bit nicer when you can actually hear it. Eh? I'll do some funny moves. Okay. And then we get a nice glass. Very lucky. There's a lovely lady who I mentor. I do online mentoring, and she makes glasses down in Cumbria. She blows glasses, and she made this beautiful hand-blown glass, which is not fully round, which I absolutely love. Who said all glasses should be round? And she's emblazoned it with bramble leaves and all sorts of things. So it's really, really beautiful. So I'm going to use that and just strain that into here. What you'll actually see, because we put the egg white in, made the whole thing really quite creamy. Turn the light on that. Yeah, so really quite creamy. It's almost got a head on it. It's absolutely delightful. So we'll just finish that off with a little spray more of the hogweed. That's our bitter element. So we've got all those things I mentioned at the start: sour, sweet, bitter, booziness from our whiskey. There is the flavour of the whiskey in there as well. And by the way, whiskey and sour fruit go together incredibly well. Sounds surprising. And so the last element we're going to use is obviously presentation, we mentioned as well. So what I'm going to do is just take some of these hogweed seeds and just pop them on top, and that's quite pretty there. And yeah, then we've got, this is Angelica, a lovely bitter thing. I mentioned this earlier on, another member of the carrot family, and the stems of this are completely hollow. So these make really lovely drinking straws. I'll just pop that in as a straw. And now I've got a drink to drink while I hopefully answer your questions if you have any. So yeah, I hope that's fun. I wish I could give you all a taste. Cheers.
Looks lovely. We've got a few questions for you then. So first of all, some nice feedback, very absorbing talk, and also an amazing website, which they've used many times. I would agree with that. And they're saying they're very interested in which mushroom you think would make the best infusion.
Oh, what a great question. Yeah, okay. Funnily enough, here is my wild fungi vermouth that has 7 types, or maybe 8, kind of lost count, of things infused. So it's wormwood base, so it's got bitters, but lots of different fungi as well. And actually it's really nice, just brings out subtle flavors of fungi. And the one I recommend is actually right here. It's a perfect question for the perfect place. Have I written on this? No. I never trust the labels I use. This is beefsteak fungus. So the mushroom pickers out there will probably have heard of this. But if you haven't, a beefsteak fungus is a bracket fungus that grows horizontally out of a tree. And it's like a slobbering grey ox tongue. And you cut it, it looks like a piece of fillet steak. And if you slice it, this has been marinating now, so you won't be able to see that very well, but you can see the shelf-like properties of it. This was quite a big one. And that was like a marbled bit of fillet steak. My friend Peter down in England put me onto this, and he says, oh, you know, like you can do really nice food things with beefsteak fungus, but it can be challenging. It's a funny texture. But he said, oh no, infuse it in booze, it's amazing. And sure enough, it is. You infuse it in booze, and because it grows on oak trees, it adds a tannic kind of flavour to the booze that you infuse it in. So this is just vodka. This is steeping in at the moment, but it's going to add this kind of woodsy tannic flavour and weirdly fruitiness, but not really mushroominess, which is quite curious as well. So that's my absolute top tip though. So if you're lucky enough to find a beefsteak fungus, do eat some, makes great carpaccio, really nice in some ways, or fruit leather. You can make mushroom leathers with it, but get some into some vodka and just leave it steeping for about, this has been in for about 2 weeks now. I'll probably leave it in for at least a month. Strain it out, and then what's left I will probably sweeten up or use it as an ingredient to make into vermouths or into other cocktails. But yeah, beefsteak fungus would be a top tip. Also chanterelles, goat rail, they give a fruity flavour. Yeah, like lots of great stuff with mushrooms. Yeah, we'll go with beefsteak though as my top tip at the moment.
There's somebody else saying if you add yolk, it makes a flip. Apparently, so I guess that's another kind of drink.
I've heard that, and I'm guessing that person's a proper cocktail person.
Yeah,
or it's some cocktail person. So yeah, it's actually worked out quite well, and I think I managed to avoid most of the yolk. So yeah, it's tasty. So a flip, deliberately, obviously.
Yeah. Someone else says, thanks again for a very informative talk. And can you use hydrangea flowers in drinks? And are there any other flowers you would use to decorate a drink?
Oh yeah, loads and loads of flowers you can use. Hydrangea is not widely known to be edible, but it's also not widely known to be toxic. So I would kind of go easy. I do remember one time we do a cocktail competition with one of the distilleries that I work with, and they fly in great bartenders from all around the world. And we take them out foraging, and they pick loads of stuff, and you try and connect them with the plants, but you know, they're coming from different cultures. And so anyway, this guy fell in love with the hydrangea flowers and had to use them in his drink. But we talked him out of it in the end, because there's not a good enough evidence that they're actually safe. So I would say, I think I would know if they were strongly poisonous, but I would say I would hold off with hydrangea. There's a great website called Plants for a Future, PFAF, and if you put that in hydrangea, it'll bring up all the edible and medicinal uses, but also any warnings and health warnings for hydrangea. But I'm not aware of it being problematic, but it's I would go easy with it. Apart from that, any flowers like rose petals, amazing. We had the berberis blossoms there, delicious. Yeah, pretty, you know, loads of any flower of an edible plant kind of works pretty well. Those sweet cicely blossoms, elderflowers scattered on a drink can add to that kind of aroma as well. Yeah, any kind of edible flowers are all over the place here.
And what botanicals would you recommend for an old-fashioned whiskey cocktail?
Oh, absolutely right. So I do make one of these, and yeah, I would use, I probably got it here, I would use some of that precious birch syrup, amazing in an old-fashioned. So I did this with our Beg distillery actually, and we tapped a birch tree, no, in fact we tapped a sycamore tree in the grounds of our Beg and reduced it to make a syrup. And that was a sweet element in our old-fashioned. For anyone who's listening, who's not a cocktail person, old-fashioned is whiskey and bitters of some description, and then something to sweeten it. So the sweet element for me would be the birch syrup, and that's really lovely because it's if you really reduce it like this, it's kind of smoky and rich. And in terms of bitters, now what bitters did we use? I'm casting my eyes all over the place here, but yeah, I think I might have actually used. Oh no, birch bitters. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, I've got a massive one of birch. I think this is birch, yeah. Yeah, so in the spring, yeah, this is exactly what we use. In the spring, whoops, we go and get all the twigs. If you look at birch trees when they're in the spring, before the leaves appear and the twigs are appearing, and scratch them with your nail, if you can see a little bit green underneath them, under the bark of the twigs, oh, they have this most amazing, it's called winter green, the flavour. And it's just really aromatic. So actually you can use birch syrup, although we use sycamore for that cocktail, and then the bitters from the birch in the spring as well. And the combination of those work really well with a peaty whiskey. Yeah, that would be my go-to, birch bitters and birch syrup. Amazing. Yeah. My go-to. Sorry.
Okay, cool. Another question, do you use pineapple weed and how do you use it?
Yeah, I do. I kind of missed it this year. You know, it's like, yeah, there's always something that kind of gets you by. Yeah, pineapple weed's great. we've talked about with bartender friends in the past with making my friend Abby, who is a great cocktail maker. She and a great pun maker. She is talks about and has made a pina colada. So a pina colada made with pineapple weed, which is, for those of you that don't know, is a little member of the chamomile family that has a lovely pineapple fragrance. You can infuse the pineapple weed into a spirit like gin or vodka, or make a syrup with it. It's probably lends itself towards a syrup. Or what I make is an oxymel, which is like a sweetened vinegar. So it's acid, sweet and sour at the same time. And I've actually got a pineapple weed oxymel lurking in here somewhere. I'm not going to try and find it now. And that's a really good sweet and sour. So yeah, I think, and then the other thing you can use in that is gorse for the coconut flavour. So you're getting sweet, you're getting the coconut and the pineapple of a pina colada, but it's Scottish. So yeah, that's Abby's pina colada. But yeah, I use pineapple weed to make an oxymel. So infuse it into vinegar, and I also infuse it into a syrup at the same time and mix the syrup and the vinegar together. And that makes a really good keeping shrub or oxymel. And that's really great for just adding a little dot of sweet and sour and aromatic pineapple-y flavour, because of course pineapple is sweet and quite sour at the same time. So I think that captures the essence of pineapple with a little weed. I'm not sure I answered the question there, but I did talk about pineapple weed.
Yeah, I think you answered the question.
Okay.
What kind of flavours would berberis berries give if infused?
Berberis berries. I don't really use them very often, but they're just too small and fiddly when there's literally tons of other stuff around. But I would imagine that they're just, I mean, I've eaten them and they're just like a little dark fruits. I think they would be not unlike, say, somewhere between a blackcurrant maybe, but I've never tried that, so I couldn't honestly say. Yeah, I would actually sooner spend my time picking blackberries or sloes or some of the bigger ones than those little fiddly Burberry berries. And to be honest, I probably pick most of the flowers in the spring anyway, so there's not going to be that many berries.
And I think the last question here is, what plants would you recommend to use with tequila?
Oh, good question. Somebody had a party at the weekend there, and somebody left some tequila behind. It's not something I've played with very much, but of course, you can play right into that salt, sweetened, that salty kind of world, salt and sour kind of world, couldn't you? So yeah, maybe you could just do a little shot of sea buckthorn followed by your tequila and salt, and see how that goes. You've got me thinking now. I've literally actually got it in a cool box sitting down at my feet here. So it's not a very nice tequila either. So I should definitely be playing around with it. Yeah, you've given me food for thought. But hey, that's the joy of this, because literally there are just infinite combinations, and all you have to do is like build up layers of bottles and find somewhere to keep them. And I'm going to need a bigger room soon. And then you can just play almost endlessly with them. Yeah. So yeah, that's my project for tonight. Thanks for the inspiration.
And do we have time for some more questions? One more maybe?
I do if you do.
Yeah. How do you balance out the antiseptic taste of meadowsweet? We've got Julie here is gin tasted like TCP. Oh, that's not what you want.
Yeah, that is true. Meadowsweet is amazing. I'm not sure what she's using. If she's using the flowers, then you should be able to kind of capture that lightness of the flowers. It's quite floral. But if you're using the leaves of meadowsweet, meadowsweet definitely gets that reputation for having that germaline TCP kind of flavor. And again, thanks to some of my great bartender pals, possibly at my friend Abby again, she has discovered that if you infuse meadowsweet leaves, but you cold infuse them into a syrup, so normally with a syrup you would induce some kind of heat, and there's proper bartenders watching, they're going to be using sous vide machines to hold syrups for infusion at a certain temperature. We're not going to be doing that at home particularly, unless you're really, really into it and have the equipment. But what you can, you know, normally with a syrup, you would bring it just to below the boil and let it cool, bring it to 50, 60, 70 degrees, no more than that. And then just keep infusing the flavor that way. But what Abby discovered is if you just cold infuse it, so make a syrup solution, so 1 part sugar to 2 parts water for a simple syrup would probably be the way to go. And then just let that cool, and then just introduce your meadowsweet leaves and leave that for 24 hours. What you get is a watermelon flavor with a hint of all the lovely kind of almondy back notes. But there's a watermelon flavor in the leaves of meadowsweet underneath the TCP that if you've got a good palate, you'll probably pick that up. And yeah, it comes out like watermelon. Yeah, amazing. The flowers themselves, I've never really had a problem with the TCP thing. I actually find them just light and floral and fluffy, and as long as you use them nice and fresh when they're on a sunny day, kind of thing.
Cool.
Advanced questions. We've clearly got some proper boozy people tuning in here. This is great.
Yeah.
Maybe we should make a regular session of this and we'll compare notes.
Oh, I think so. Weekly.
Bring their own cocktail, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, next time we'll need to prepare with the ingredients ourselves as well. Now you've shown us. I think we've got one last question then. How do you go about making a good vermouth?
Well, I showed you the link to my website, and to be honest, that's a whole webinar. But essentially, no, I can do it really quickly, okay? So what you do is you make a load of tinctures. Tinctures are just putting stuff in strong spirit, 40% vodka, typically. So any plant that is safe and you like the flavor of, and it should include wormwood. So make lots of little jars of them. So all these little guys here, some of the bigger ones as well, but all the little jars behind me are little kind of things that I'll just use in kind of small parts. And some of them are syrups, some of them are tinctures, and some of them are the other one. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, some of the tinctures and some of them are syrups. So then what you do is you get your base medium, which would normally be a wine for vermouth. Look, there's no rules when you're making it at home. You know, you're not trying to sell anything to anyone. You don't have to worry about appellation labels or anything like that. You know, just go with it. And so if you want to use an old can of flat cider, you know, use that and make your vermouth base with that. But what you want is something lightly alcoholic, normally wine. If you made your own wine, so much better. Start with a white wine that doesn't have loads and loads of flavor, and then you would just infuse whatever botanicals you like into that. Warm it gently in a pan, but don't boil it or anything because you're losing precious alcohol then. And just infuse gently. And then once that's infused with some of the stuff you like, so it could be our friend Angelica here, you know, like the seeds of Angelica, amazing just now, or even the root. You could put in some of your fir needles straight into the wine, heat it gently, so almost like making a mulled wine, think of it that way. But then let it cool, strain out everything out, so then you've got your wine that's infused and getting a little bit interesting, and then you add all your little tinctures, so a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and maybe do it a tablespoon at a time so you can kind of taste the changing temperature. It's an amazingly fun thing to do because you get to taste it constantly. And just kind of like, yeah, you normally end up having to go away and have a sleep and then come and finish it the next day. And then once it gets really, really bitter, and depending on how bitter you like your vermouth, then you start introducing sweetness at the end. So the sweetness then balances out the bitter, and sweet versus bitter is just kind of balances out and mellows the whole thing out. And then at the end, you've got some concoction that is just unique, you know, and it's just made. And you could do that. You don't have to have hundreds of bottles sitting around to do that. You could literally do that with 3 different plants, you know, like make a syrup with your pineapple weed. And oh my goodness, an enormous wood wasp just flew in the window of my room. How exciting! It's about that big. Yeah, just play around. You do it with 3 things. You can infuse some yarrow into some wine. You could make, say you've got some pineapple weed syrup that you made in the summer and you don't know what to do with, and say you got something else kicking about, some hogweed seeds, and you make a tincture with the hogweed seeds. Those 3 things together, you got your sweet and you've got some bitter, and then you've got something to kind of add some body and oomph to the wine. And see how it goes. And you're just balancing those potions at the end as well. You feel a little bit like get a fix or something. Oh, a little bit more of that. Oh, I've overdone it. A bit more of that. A bit more of that. And it's just fun. So that's the basic process. Please read the blog. It's quite long, but the process is simple, and it can be as simple or as complicated as you want. You can make it with 100 different botanicals, or you can make it with 3 or even 2 if you wanted to. But it's I think it is the pinnacle of playing around, like all the stuff we've been talking about today. Vermouth making for me is like the pinnacle of that. It's like, let's make some real fun stuff that's, you know, like really speaks of our land. So this one here is Galloway bog fernet. Fernet's like kind of vermouthy, like Italian bitter thing. That's just made with bog plants, you know, so it's like bog fernet. I thought that would be fun, a bit like Fernet Branca. And then wild mushroom one made with all my favorite mushrooms, mostly legal ones. And then yeah, I've got another one that I made lockdown vermouth, which is just all the stuff that was within 5 minutes walk of the house, you know. So it's just like, let's see what's there and let's just play with that stuff and throw it all in. So yeah, fun.
Great, lots of new things to try.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think that's all the questions, unless anyone has any last minute additions. We have lots of people saying thank you very much, really interesting talk, lots of things to try. Yeah, everyone, I know I certainly enjoyed it, so thank you so much, and thank you for fitting us in. I know it's got really busy again now that your walks are back on.
I realise it went a bit quiet on Emily for a while, but we got there in the end, so thank you for having patience with my...
That's all right. And thank you to everybody for joining us. We've had quite a lot of fun through the festival, and we've only got one thing left tomorrow night. We've got our last event where we'll be launching the community archives that we're gathering, which will be a collection of short stories about how people felt and what happened to them during the lockdown in the local area, and we'll also be unveiling some community artwork. So if anyone would like to join that, then drop me an email. But thank you very much again, and thank you so much, Mark, for a very interesting talk. Enjoy the rest of your cocktail. Look forward to seeing the tequila experiments as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to try that. Yeah, I've got an early start tomorrow, so maybe now's not the time.
Yeah.
Drink for thought. Yeah. Thank you everyone for listening in. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Goodbye, everybody.